can go and customize your theme either by uploading an image, and you can search on Bing. So if I want to find an image on daffodils, I can then find one and say, actually, I really like this particular image, and I could add it. Or I could go and get an image that I already have on my laptop in my OneDrive and use that instead. The next thing is that you then start actually giving your quiz a title, a name. So I'm going to call this one Daffodils because perhaps I'm trying to investigate a student's understanding of the poem Daffodils. And I can then say something along the lines of, this is to test your, it's very difficult to type accurately when you've got somebody watching and when you've got so many, of the poem Daffodils. It gives both you and the students an idea of what's going to be investigated. Now, as we move through the particular quiz, you have a range of options for the questions you can ask. So when you click on the add question, the box comes up initially with a choice, a text, a rating, a date, and there are also drop-down lists for other question types. So I'm going to lead you through it one by one. Multiple choice, it populates a blank question with 2 options. The number of options is entirely up to you, and you can adjust it. So you can say who wrote the poem. Let's go Daffodils. And you can write here Shakespeare, Wordsworth. Let's choose one on Angelo, as in Maya Angelou. So now you have a number of options. So you can add more options, as many as you would like. And you then have the opportunity to add, to indicate which is the correct answer. So we'll do that. And you have to allocate a point score. So in this case, I'm going to say 1. Now, I want to make sure that my students answer every single question that I've posed to them, so I must tick the required box. If you do not, then it means the students can leave that question and move on. And we want to encourage our students to always give it a try, not to give up, so I always tick that particular box. Now, if you want to, you can also, for your incorrect statements, also give some feedback to the students. So if you look at the box next to my incorrect answer, I can put that there and say, Shakespeare's poetry uses iambic pentameter, for example. So I can give my students some information as to why that's not the correct answer. Or I could say, for example, Maya Angelou did not write in this style, for example. So I've got some things that will give them immediate feedback. Now, that's enough for one particular question, but perhaps I want a variety of questions, such as short questions. So I'm looking for text answers, at which point I will then choose text. When I choose the text particular question, you'll notice I can add an answer. So if, for example, I wanted to say, let's go back up there. What color are daffodils? It's nice and easy. I can give an answer, yellow. Very easy. And I can add that. If I want a longer answer, so if I want to ask something along the lines of what is the theme of this poem, and I expect my students to write a great deal more, I will then say it's a long answer. Clicking on that means that they are not limited now by the size of the text box. And I can increase that to 3 points, for example. And I then have that. The rating is quite a useful one if you'd like your students to indicate how they feel about a poem. But honestly, I don't use it much in terms of evaluating their understanding. So if I've decided, oh, you know what, that wouldn't really work, I can go and delete my question without a problem. I can also move my questions up. I can move the what color are daffodils up to the top. And suddenly this is now question number 1. So you have a huge amount of flexibility. Just trying to keep track of where we are at the moment because there's so many amazing questions that you can utilize. And I want to show you an example in one of my forms that I've already got, which is a common errors quiz, which I asked my colleagues to complete for a bit of fun. Now, if you have a look at question 6 on my quiz, you can see I've asked, if we have 2 or more adjectives in a sentence, what is the general order in which they should appear? See, even English teachers make mistakes in questions. So this will then give the students the opportunity to rank and say which order should they appear in. It's a different way of marking. Please be aware, it doesn't matter how many points you allocate to that question. If they make one mistake, it is marked wrong completely, so just be aware. The next question type that you could also add is if you get the drop-down menu and you get more question types, you get something called a file upload. When you get a file upload, it tells you that there's going to be a new folder created in SharePoint and that the files that are uploaded will be captured in that folder. And if we click OK, we can then give our students a task to say, please upload a copy of you reciting the poem. Once I've done that, I can say how many files I would like them to upload. I can indicate what size is suitable. I'll just scroll a bit further down here. Go back into that question. So I can limit them to 10 meg, 100 meg, or if I'm feeling generous, a whole gig. I can then also say what kind of file they can upload. I'm just going to give that 1 point. So I could go here. I can specify the file types. I can say, I only want you to upload a video. If you upload a PDF, it will not accept it. Okay. And I think that pretty much brings me to the end of my little slot around the types of questions. Obviously, feel free to go and explore the ones that are there. And I'm going to hand over to Janine now because she's going to look at some of the other things you can do with a quiz to make it interesting and meet your needs. Over to you, Janine.
Thank you, Wendy. Setting up the quiz initially, you get the choice of putting in an image or a video. Just like when Wendy was showing you at the top of the quiz, with each question again, you can either search for an image on Bing or whatever your search is, and then go up to OneDrive, or I can upload. So I'm going to give you an example of uploading a picture into there. So if I want to put a picture of angles in, I can select this picture here, and as soon as I insert it, it will put it into my question. Then I can type the question that relates to that. So I might ask them to calculate the size of S. Size of angle S. Okay, so in this, when they are responding then, they will be able to enter an answer. If I would like to put in some answers that will for angle S, and I know that it is 30 degrees, I can put in the 30. Now for some of them, they will type in 30, and others they might type it. So I could say perhaps they will put 30 with a 0 because they don't know what else, with a O because they don't know how else to do the degrees. I'll get into how they can answer in maths terms in a little bit later. All right, so once you've put a picture into the question, that would be an individual question. You could also, like I showed you just now, have put a video in. So then when they come to the question, you might say something like, watch the video clip and then answer the question. So they would be able to just click on the video link and it'll take them straight to the video, and they could then answer the question that was posed in the video. Okay. The other thing that you can do is to add sections. So the same place that you were adding your questions, when you add new, you'll have a choice at the end here. There's a drop down that says more question types, and at the bottom here you can see it says section. So if I add a new section, it automatically tells me which section it is, but I can give the section a name. So I can say it's now graphing, and I can add a description of what they want to do. If I am asking all the questions related to a particular graph, I might want to insert the graph at this point and then have the questions following underneath that. Another thing I can do is to lead them from one question to another, and that comes under branching. Okay, it's under your section should be branching. I'm not sure why it's not giving it to me now, but under one of these choices, we'll come back to it later, you should get an option to branch. And what branching does is it leads you, either you can make them go to the end of the form, or they can go straight to the next question. It will lead them straight to the next question. Now, I mentioned maths answers just now. So if I need to put in a mathematical sum, I can't just type it with a normal keyboard. So when you go to add your question, and let's make this a text question. I want to be able to type a text question. If I go down to the three dots at the bottom here with my options, one of the options is to add a maths question. So then it will give me a maths keyboard that I can enter. So I can ask them to do a fraction for me. 2/3 times by 3/1. Let's make it another fraction. Let's do a square root rather. The square root of 4. And so then when I work that out, I can look at what the correct answers are. And I can put in my correct answers. Whoops. Okay, so adding some answers here. So I can work out what this answer should be, and again I can answer it as a maths sum. Now when the girls or your students need to answer the questions, if I go to preview, which is something you can do if you want to see what the questions look like, this will show you what it looks like when they are answering. And if I go to the question that I was on at the bottom, let's get there, my maths question, you'll see that when they want to answer a maths question, it straight away gives them the drop down with all the maths symbols. So they can also answer in maths symbols, not just with the normal keyboard. All right, Wendy's going to show you a few more tricks on the templates and how we work with these.
Thank you, Janine. Excuse me. So one of the things that we like to do as teachers is share resources. Why do something twice when there's something already there? So I'd like to show you how you can share your quiz that you have put together. So up along next to the preview symbol and the theme symbol is the share button. If you click on that, there are a number of options that become available to you. First and foremost, you need to think about who you wish to share the quiz with. If you specify only particular people in the organization, you really are limiting who can access it. If you say only people in my organization can respond, that's wonderful. It allows you to use it across your school, but not allow other people to use it in other places. Or if you were collecting a form, for example, you could also have anyone can respond. So I'm going to say only people in my organization can respond. I then have a number of options. I can copy the URL. I could shorten the URL and then copy it. So there, for example, it's shortened. And I'm going to start with this icon on the right first. Obviously, it's an envelope and you can see it's an email. So if I click on that, What it then does is it then forces it to open in an email which I can then send to people. Okay, if you have a look there, you can see I've now got the link, and I can decide who I wish to send it to. So in this case, I'm going to send it to just one person in the team, and it goes to that person, and then they can answer the form. The other option that we have is to embed in a Sway or a web page. So that is the option there, and you get the code, you copy that, and you embed it into your website or Sway. Another way is to use QR codes, and you can download the QR code. You can give students an opportunity to access on a tablet or even a mobile device that allows them to read a QR code. And then lastly, we have the link, which is quite useful if you were working in a team and you wish to give students the opportunity to answer it quickly. I often use the channels in my English grade 6 team, so I release things to each class as and when I am working with them. So if I copy that and I go across to our TeachMeet team, which we've set up for this afternoon, and I put a little new conversation, I literally paste that in. So I tend to use shortcuts, Control V, and what happens is it posts, and then you can see the form sitting there. If I go back to my form, the other thing that I can do is I can collaborate and share as a template, but Janine has more information about that for you. Back to you, Janine.
So when you are sharing with other colleagues, so on my TeachMeet team, I've taken the link and I'm going to go and post in this TeachMeet team the form. All right, so now if you are the colleague that this has been sent to, and I open it up, you will see it's going to give me an option at the top here to duplicate it. That means that I'm going to have my own copy of the form. So unlike Collaborate, where I was altering the same one, so we were working on the same quiz or the same form together, here you can see it's made me a copy. So perhaps if I am doing a quiz for the grade 7s and my colleague wants to do a similar quiz for the grade 8s, she can then work with her own copy and alter it and make it specific to the grade 8s. Right, as Wendy has said, when I am working in my team and I share it, I can get a copy to put it into Teams, or I can simply put it into a Teams assignment, and we're going to go through that a little bit more just now, but this is where you would go. So in your team, you would click on Assignments, and when you push Create to create an assignment, you will see that one of your options is a quiz. Okay. The other thing that you will see when you're working in your quiz is that you have 3 little dots here with a few more settings. And if I go to the settings up here, I can change a few more things here. One of them being who can respond. Now, Wendy already spoke about the fact that you can send it only to people in your organization or to anyone. So if you were sending this to parents, perhaps, and this would probably be more a form than a quiz, then you would have to click anyone can respond. Whereas if I'm sending it to those in my organization, I can choose whether it is going to record their name or whether it's going to be anonymous. And very importantly, how many times they can respond to it. So if you've sent them a maths quiz and you only want them to have one chance to answer it, you would click on one response per person. Okay, once you've done that, we need to look at when the quiz starts. So we can set the start date and put in any particular date. We can also send an end date as to when it is going to finish. Right, some more settings, Wendy.
Have to remember the mic. It's tricky. Yes, so once you've actually been working through your settings, an important thing to consider is whether you show results automatically or not. So that is up here at the top. Now what you need to be aware of is if you have set a completely multiple choice style quiz, that is fine. It's not a problem to release those marks. However, you have the opportunity, even on a multiple choice quiz, to override the auto-grading options. And certainly in the case of certain kinds of questions, you may wish to review it as the teacher and not allow the students to see their results, because there's something quite demoralizing about receiving a score of 2 out of 20, when in actual fact, if the teacher marks it, that score goes up quite considerably. So think about whether you want them to see it automatically or whether you would like to first review those marks. And I certainly recommend that that's a consideration for you. The other option that is quite useful is that you can shuffle questions as well. I particularly like this when I want to ensure that my students are working independently and not sharing their knowledge, doing a collaborative quiz across the class. So by shuffling the questions, each child or each student sees a different question for example, out of the questions you've set. Obviously, if you're trying to build a question or a set of questions, that's not really going to work. But you can actually lock some of the questions. So if I wanted questions 1 to 3 to follow sequentially, and then from 4 onwards to be randomly shuffled, I can specify that. So it's an incredibly useful tool to you as a teacher. Also, in these settings, we have the option to have the automatic recording of the name. And what I just want to say about that is, in high school, it's a lot easier. Your students are a lot more used to actually putting their name on pieces of work. Teaching in the primary school, it's something we have to remind our students of regularly. So I do tend to require that they put their name and they put their class. I teach across the grade, so this is very useful for me when I extract marks in Excel. I can then use this to sort the marks and just have the one class whose marks I can then record or look at and see if there are any anomalies. Now, going back to the auto-grading and the like, if you have a look at this particular question that I've said that I would like it to auto-grade because it's nice and easy. When I look at the responses and I review the answers, you will see that it has highlighted the incorrect answer in red and it has highlighted the correct answer in green. Now, if I decide that the person who's answered the question has actually got it correct and I decide to award a mark, obviously it is incorrect, I need to point out that when the student looks at it, it will still be colored red. So it does get a little bit tricky under those circumstances. It does also change from saying auto-graded to then having your mark. Oh, please excuse me, I have suddenly got a very itchy nose. The other thing that I'd like to point out is that you can review your questions either by student, and Tracy and Kevin were very kind to complete this form. Please do not judge their answers. It was merely for the purposes of demonstration. But I can look at Tracy's and I can get an understanding of what Tracy does well and what Tracy is perhaps struggling with just by looking at her individual responses. or I can actually go and review them by question. So if I review by question, I can now see, okay, there is, if we go to that one about which of these is grammatically correct, I can see which students got it correct, which students did not get it correct. So it gives you some options. I also want to go back to if I'm reviewing my answers and I would like to do a piece of work that needs to be marked by me, okay, which is in this case question 5. Now I marked, I think I marked Tracy's, but Kevin's I know I haven't. It automatically highlights that I need to have input. It puts that needs review in red. I would need to mark it to see whether Kevin got the right marks, and sorry Kevin, unfortunately you didn't get the 1 mark there. I enter the 0 into the box, and I could actually give Kevin some feedback on that mark. But before I talk more about that, I think I'd like to hand over to Janine because she's going to deal with feedback. Thank you, Janine.
So I've also been getting my colleagues to answer some quizzes for today, and you'll see that there is one over here which I called the maths quiz, and 3 of my colleagues responded for me, so now I need to go and mark it. So at the top here I'm going to change to responses to see what their responses are, and if I go down to review them, I can see that at the bottom here who's got what, and I want to then, just review the answers. Now over here I can see that this one only put an 8, and we try to stress in maths that they put the units in. So I can go over to the little question on the top here and give some feedback to this one. So I'm going to say, please remember your units. Oops. Okay, so on top of that, I need to review it. As Wendy was saying, it's put it in red there because I do need to review it. But because she didn't put her units, I'm only going to give her 1 mark out of 2. Once I've reviewed all the questions, or some of them have been auto-graded, I can go up the top here and I can see that Kevin has got 3 out of 5 for his maths quiz, and perhaps I want to comment on that. Then I'm going to click on the question mark at the top here, which gives me this space. All right, so that means that I'm going to say really great effort. And so once I've finished reviewing them and I've made my comments for each of them, I can then go and post the scores. Now there are different ways that you can post the scores. You can do each one individually, or you can go, once you've finished reviewing all of them, you can click on this here, which is to post the scores. And you'll see that it reminds you that once you've posted the scores, it will give them all their quiz results and their feedback, and they will be able to see them by opening the original link. So if you had put that link into Teams, they will go back to their team and click on the link. If the link was in an email, that's where they'll need to go and find their scores. Once I've done that, you'll see if I go back to those 3 questions, I can no longer post scores. It says there that it is already posted. One of the other lovely things with these quizzes is once I have finished reviewing them, I can also go and export my marks to Excel. So let's just go back, and over here you'll see that I can open in Excel. So the scores that my students received will all be posted into Excel, and if I open the Excel spreadsheet, you can see there the 3 respondents that I had and the total points that they got, as well as my comments. I can then, if I scroll across here, I can break down of each question what they answered and what they got for each question. So that's really handy to copy and paste into your markbook without having to retype each of those. Back to the quiz, you'll see that Wendy was reviewing per question. Okay, we can review per question or per person. And I can go, when I'm going through these with the students, once I have posted them, I would go back in here and preferably go through it. Sorry, just go back out of here. If you go to review answers and go through the questions question by question, then as you're discussing it with them, perhaps sharing this on the board, it is anonymous. They don't see then who put which response, but you can discuss the different answers and why they were correct or weren't without them seeing whose answer was right or whose answer was wrong. You're also able to print these responses. Wendy, do you want to tell us how you do that?
Certainly, Janine, but before I do, there's two very important things that I need to cover. The first is that there's been a question about whether we can auto-shuffle some questions and others not, and I'll show you where you do that again. But I also want to just show you, hopefully you can see on my screen, that there is the Microsoft Educator code for those of you who are wishing to get credit for doing your training through this webinar. We will show this code again, but you can see it on my screen there. If you enter that into the Microsoft Educator community site, you will then obtain credit for that. So just going back to the question about the shuffling questions, if you have a look here where my little purple arrow is, you can see you can choose to either shuffle all, or you lock certain questions and the rest will then be auto-shuffled. So just to clarify, that locks those and the rest are auto-shuffled. So I hope that answers that question. So going back to then printing your responses, if I want to have a look and see, I'd like Tracy's response to be printed, perhaps I want to share it with somebody else, like perhaps her parents, and show them where she's going wrong, and unfortunately I can only do it on a paper base. I can click on the three dots under the feedback, click on that, and I have the option to print response. Now, printing response is not only in a hard copy. I could ask for it to print to PDF, so Microsoft Print to PDF. I can print it to PDF. I can email her parents or whoever with her results. I can also, if I was back, and I perhaps would like to print a blank copy of the quiz for myself as a teacher to keep in a resource file, or I need to provide somebody with a copy of it, a hard copy for whatever reason, I can go then to where I see the whole quiz, and I can click on that, and I can, oh sorry, that's the print summary. I can go back to my share, and over here, sorry, I've lost my train of thought, under settings, sorry. It's what happens when you're also paying attention to questions. And you've got your settings, and you can actually go and find the print form. So if you actually just click on the right button, and then you could print to PDF, or you could print to an actual hard copy in the printer. Now, the student can also print a copy as well, so they have the opportunity that you can set it up, and in the settings in advance you can actually allow them to print, and you have to say allow receipt of responses after submission. When you do that, that will then bring up a slide for them to actually be able to print their response as well. It's not really critical because we want to try and avoid using too much paper. You can also print a summary of your particular quiz. There you'll see, if you click on the three dots when you're looking at the questions, you can print a summary. You can see they scored an average of 1.5, and you then have an electronic copy or a hard copy. You can also integrate forms into OneNote, and I'm going to open up OneNote and just, I need to go and find one of the other teacher copy pages. Let's go into reading log. If you have a look there, you can now see that's not accepting any responses at the moment because it's no longer active, but I've just literally put it into the OneNote by going into insert, and when I go into insert, there is the opportunity, if you go to the right, to go and click and insert a form. So that all works into OneNote, and then you don't have to go anywhere else. So that really wraps it up for the moment for most of the things around quizzes. We're going to move on to assignments next in Teams. There is, however, some questions, so I just want to have a look. If I have one sentence which has 2 required answers for 2 points, how do I answer 1 and answer 2? Oh, that's a wonderful question. Let me give you a quick example. If I add another question, so I'm going to do a text question, and I'm going to say, where do eagles live? I'm really just making that up. I could add 2 answers, so I can add that over there. I could say high up, and I could say, and then add another answer in the mountains. However, what I will say is what this does is it accepts one of each of one or the other. It doesn't accept both. If you do want both, I don't know, Janine, if you've ever had to do that.
So I would...
Yeah.
Thanks, Wendy. I would do it by adding it as a section if I wanted 2 different questions from the same thing. So if you go and add a section and you put your question under section, then under that section, so let's steal Wendy's, where are the eagles? Then under that, I would be able to say answer 1 or give 1 choice. I'm not sure if this is what the candidate was actually asking, and put 1 answer there. And then under the next question, I can ask them to answer 2. So that way you would have 2 options with 1 question. That's just a different way of doing it. So it depends whether you want an either or, as Wendy was saying, or if you want them to be separate answers. And then it would answer each one separately. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks, Janine. See, even I'm learning something new today. So moving across to Teams, you should see on my screen we've set up our little mock team for today. And up at the top, you will see the option to set assignments. And when you click on the assignments tool, you will then have an opportunity to see drafts assigned and returned. And we'll then just show you briefly how to create an assignment. We've got a few that we were actually testing. So I'm going to press create. You then have the option to create a new assignment, a quiz, so it ties in beautifully with what we've been doing, and also from an existing assignment. So if you set something this year that you really found was very useful and productive and you want to use it again next year, you can draw on those resources and not start from scratch. We're going to show you starting from scratch. So the first thing is that you have the opportunity to enter a title. So in this case, I'm going to call it poetry writing, and I want to add a category. So it's quite useful if you want to have a category for your particular task, your assignments, so it's a lot easier to find them. You can do that. Now I've already created a category, writing, so I could put it there, but let's just assume that I want to create a new one. I literally go add category, I type and press enter, and now I have got a second category that I could allocate it to. The instructions, you are able to use formatting. You could also include a link to something. So this is where you actually explain your task to your students. I really recommend that the instructions are in this box. Even if you do add it as a resource, it's a quick, easy way to see what's required rather than having to click on a resource, open it up and wait for that document to open. You can, of course, add additional resources. So I could, for example, add I could click on that and it'll take me into my folders, and I could choose from OneDrive, from my class notebook, a link, a new file, make code, a variety of things to add a particular resource to the task. So that's very, very useful, especially if you're trying to scaffold for your students. And when you do add a resource, so if I just choose to, for example, if I go into my, let's just sort that quickly. If I go into English and I want to add a particular poem. Let's say, am I going to poetry, and I decide I'm actually going to put sonnets there, or actually let's say we do the Pied Piper of Hamelin because I'd like them to use that as inspiration. As it is loading up, you'll see that it indicates where the students can't edit or can. So one of the things you can do is you can say that they can edit their own copy. This is very useful if you've drawn up a worksheet that you'd like them to complete. That can then be something they can download, edit, and upload later. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to look at adding a rubric. So particularly as an English teacher, when we are marking pieces of work, such as creative writing or transactional writing, we want to use a rubric, and those rubrics are easy on Teams. So the first thing I say is I'm going to add a rubric, and you can see I have a few already that are there. Now I'm going to actually start one from scratch and show you how you would put that together. I'm not going to cut and paste all the blocks in, otherwise we might be here all afternoon. I will show you a completed one. But I'm going to enter a title. So I would say, for example, poetry. If you can hear a siren in the background, just be patient. It will eventually stop. It's our lightning warning system that's telling us we're now in the all clear. So if you can't hear everything, don't panic. I'll be back in a moment. I think we're cleared in all ways to go ahead now. So I have I've called it poetry, and I'm going to say using poem given, rewrite with specific requirements, just something along those lines. Now, I can then enter the criteria against which I'm going to measure the student's piece of work. So perhaps I want to measure the content of the work. In other words, have they actually met the brief? Are they writing an original piece of work? I could label it as excellent, good, fair, poor. I could also give this a number. So if we're marking according to levels, you might want to put in the 7 levels that you mark against, or 5, whatever works for you. So if you're teaching younger students, you might want to reduce it to maybe a 1, 2, 3 scale. If I wanted to add another column, I could either copy the column or I could add a column. So I'm going to, for this, copy a column, and I'm going to call this one I'm going to call this one good, and this one I'm going to call average. Okay. I can then very handily cut and paste from a Word document all the various criteria. I could add more rows with more criteria, etc., etc. Now I'm just going to cancel that because we don't need that. I'm actually going to add one I already have, and I'm going to use the one called sonnet. So I'm going to go next, and you'll see this one's already been populated. It's in there ready to be used. What you will notice is that you have the option to either evenly distribute the weights of the various sections, or you can weight them more heavily. So if you look here, I wanted to focus in this task on the content, so their creative writing skills, and their vocabulary. And I've put the section about their use of the appropriate format and their spelling, punctuation and grammar as being less weighted. I can always change that for each one of my particular tasks. The other thing just to point out is that's going to spit out a mark out of 100. But it's quite important when you're working with younger students just to allay some of their panic that they think this is going to count 100 marks towards their assessment for the term. And so just to make you aware of that. I'd like to hand over to Janine, who's got some very handy hints for managing your planning for assignments.
Thanks, Wendy. I'm going to show them where to find your draft that you're busy with. So we all know teachers are busy. We snitch 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there to work on something. You don't have to do this the moment before you want to assign it to the students. So what we can do is work on something, as Wendy was working on her poetry one. And if I go into drafts here, you'll see there's Wendy's poetry writing. So when I have another 5 minutes that I want to work on that awesome rubric that takes quite a bit of time to set up, Wendy, I can go back into my poetry assignment and continue to work on it right where I was before. Okay, so there you can see it all as it was. If you now get interrupted, you've got a student arrives to ask you some questions, you can just save it, and when you have time again, it will be in your drafts waiting for you. The other thing that's really handy is to be able to schedule your work. So if I want to set up all my assignments for next week beforehand, when you set them up, as Wendy was showing you all the dates and all the details, you'll see at the bottom here you have an option that says assignments will post immediately with late turn-ins allowed. Now that means that it's going to appear in their team saying that the assignment is there. If I, however, wanted only to post next week, I can go to edit, and in the edit here I can tick this box at the top which says to schedule to assign in the future, and then I can say actually this assignment is only for next week, so I'm going to have it post on Monday the 8th, and they're going to do it in their lesson time, which means I want it to start at 10 o'clock when their lesson starts, and it's going to be due also on Monday at the end of their lesson at 11 a.m. Now, one of the things that I have done before that you need to be careful of, and it's going to tell me I've done it here again, I didn't do it here, is to put it as PM instead of AM. So do watch your AMs and PMs. The girls wonder why it hasn't posted in their team yet. Meantime, it's only going to post at 10 o'clock at night. So do watch that. You can also choose to close the assignment. If you close it, they won't be able to submit it late. If you don't, if I leave this close date open, it means they can submit it after the due date. It will just set you a notice that it was submitted late. Right, so let's just have a look at what that looks like on their view. So once I have scheduled this, I can go at the top here with my extended menu once again, the 3 dots. Not that one, I need to open an actual assignment first. Okay, and let's go out of Wendy's one to one that I was working on before. So I'm going to go to this one here, and you'll see I've got different options. One of them is the extended menu, and then you'll see here I've got an option to look at the student view. Now if I click on student view, it's going to show me this is what they are going to see. So in this assignment, I had attached a quiz to it, so one of the quizzes I'd set up in Microsoft Forms, and it's got the date for them, it tells them the points that are possible, and any instructions that I've typed in, like Wendy was telling you about typing in instructions. Right, so once they have completed it, they will then turn it in, okay, and post it. But you also have the option, and I'm going to have to go into another team now because this TeachMeet team doesn't give it to me as an option, I don't think. Sorry, I put this into the PowerPoint slides, which you will be made accessible to you, so you can go and look at any of these afterwards. But if I assign a test in one of my others, not working either. So if your school is registered with Turnitin, then when you assign your quiz, or when you set up your quiz, you will have an option at the bottom, just getting there, to put all documents through Turnitin. So if you need to do a plagiarism check on any assignment that they submit, then you would need to click on this button here so that it says yes. So that means that every assignment that is submitted through this will be put through a plagiarism check, and you as a teacher can then go and check each of the evaluations on that and see what percentage of plagiarism has been picked up. Right, let's go back to the one I was on. All right, in our assignments here, we also have other settings that we can go and check on, and that was up here. And these will be general settings for all your assignments. So if you go to this extended menu to assignment settings, you'll see there's a few things that you can check as well. So if you've got new students that were added to your team and you don't want all the assignments that were there previously added onto theirs, then you would say here that new students will receive the assignments? No. However, if you want them to be able to go back and do those assignments because you think they would be valuable practice, then obviously you would change that to yes. One of the things that it does generally is every time you do an assignment, it posts it into the general posts. If you wanted to change that, Wendy's mentioned about talking in channels, so perhaps you only want it posted into the channel. I could go and change that setting to say that it needs to go to a particular channel. Now in this team I haven't got any channels set up, so I can't demonstrate that, but that's where you would find all your channels. All right, and then there's some more fun stuff that they can reply to and things like that. Once they have entered and they've assigned it, they've completed it, you'll be able to go into the assignment and you'll be able to see who has looked at it. So when it says not turned in, it means she hasn't even opened the assignment. Kevin here you can see has viewed the assignment but hasn't done it, and neither has Carl. So let's go to one that they did do. If I go to up the previous ones here, because I know they did complete some of these for me. So this maths one here, you can see that they all turned it in late. Okay, now I have already reviewed 2 of them, and that's why it is under returned. So Kevin's one and Carl's one I have reviewed. You can see the green tick here that it was posted, whereas Amy's one I still need to turn. So if I want to mark it now, I can open it up here. Now this particular one was the form that we had earlier, and you saw that we reviewed these here. Okay, so that's where I would go to find it to mark it. Once I was happy with it, I can tick here and return it to Amy, so she now gets that that assignment returned to her. She'll be able to look at her mark. If I'm marking different assignments, I need to find the other one that these dear colleagues of mine answered for me. Not the maths one, where is the other one? Can't find where it went to for a moment. All right, there was one that they did for me where they handed in work, they attached work, and I just need to find that so I can show you how you can mark it on the screen. Sorry, just...
Perhaps while you do that, Janine, yes, I can actually help you there with actually using the rubric to mark something. So perhaps that will help while you take a moment to find
the ones they marked.
It always takes time sometimes. So my example is I asked my colleagues to find a sonnet for me. I've used that sonnet rubric, and you can see I've opened Amy's up. So when I want to mark against the rubric, all I do is where it says rubric, I'm going to click on that and it opens it up for me. I can then choose the particular points that I would like to give her. So obviously it is an Elizabethan. I can't actually say that it's not very original. You know, the vocabulary might be a little bit difficult for us to understand, and gracious, some strange spellings there. I can then do that. I can enter some feedback to Amy and say, well done. And when I pop that in, what happens is that it gives me a point score. The feedback does not appear in this little box. It sits with the rubric, which she would have to open to see, but I could also write it equally over here to say, well done, and then I return the particular piece of work. Have you managed to come right, Janine?
I did, thank you, I found it. I forgot that I'd called it written work because I asked them to write their answers on a piece of paper, and so they had to then load it up as a Word document. That was the instruction. So Carl loaded his here as a Word document. He's actually loaded 2 documents, and I can now go and review these. If you just need to read through it and put a mark in, you would do that here. So read through it, enter any feedback, and put in the points. However, if you want to mark it on the screen, marking it online, you would need to open it in Word. Now, there's 2 ways to do that. One is to click here with Open in Word, or if you go to Editing, you can open it in the desktop app. That then allows you to take your handy stylus and to mark it on the screen. I'm going to choose my nice red pen, and I can then write on the screen. I can do any editing that needs to be done. When I close it, it will appear in their team. Okay, might take a little while to reflect. I can still go and put the mark in, and that way they will be able to see their marks. Unfortunately, that's all we're going to have time for today. Perhaps we'll be able to schedule another TeachMeet where we are able to show you some other little tricks, some other quizzes that you could do, and we're going to open to any questions now. Please also remember to fill in the form in the chat that was posted in the chat. We have a question on to show how to assign specific learners. Do you want to do
I'll take that one, thanks Janine. So if I go back to my assignment where I'm allocating the poetry writing, I have the opportunity here to assign to all my students, or I can pick some. So I think Kevin and Amy both did theirs, but Kyle forgot to do his, so I could just choose to just assign it to Kyle, and when I assign it, it will only appear in his particular team notification. The others will not receive it as well. And just finally, to finish off, I'm just going to go back on my screen to show you our code for this particular course. Thank you so very, very much for joining us this afternoon. We hope that you found it helpful. There is a form that is being shared in the chat for you to complete, and please make a note of this code so that you can redeem it on the Microsoft Educator community website. And also you will be able to access a PowerPoint presentation that we put together, which gives screenshots of all the work that we did and showed you today. So thank you very much. Thank you, Janine. It's been great fun, and we hope you have a wonderful evening further.
Thank you. I don't think there are any other questions that have come in. Thank you so much for joining us.